Hi, so my name is Fabrice, and I have a confession to make. I'm an addict. I'm a startup addict. So basically, over the last few years, I've invested in over 270 startups. And the irony is, we actually never set out to be angel investors or venture capitalists. So my partner, Jose Marin, and I have been entrepreneurs for the last 18 years. And what happened is, by virtue of being consumer-facing entrepreneurs, or reasonably in the public face, you start being contacted by various entrepreneurs who want access. They want your ideas, they want your feedback, and they want capital. So little by little, we started investing, and lo and behold, it started working reasonably well. So we had many exits, over 20x, 30x, one of 55x. And so we decided, okay, maybe we need to formalize this. And so we came up with a process and a number of heuristics that have actually been very, very successful, to the point where, if you look at our performance, on average, we've had 5.7x multiples on realized exits, so not on monopoly money, but on actual money. We've had 70 exits. We've made money on about half of them. We've lost on about half of them. We have a 72% realized IRR on our exits, and a 3.15-year average holding period. So it's basically top performance of VCs. We were looking at the Kauffman Foundation studies, and VCs, the top 6 of 99 VCs had returns over 3x, and we've been averaging 5.7x. Now, the funny thing is, we're actually entrepreneurs, and we're even more successful as entrepreneurs than we are, and as founders than we are as investors. And if you look over the last 18 years, where we've been building mostly marketplaces, we've raised over 1.5 billion in capital. We've created companies worth probably upwards of 10 billion, but let's say 5 billion to be safe, and 4,000 jobs created. And the reason we've been able to do that is because, frankly, we've made every mistake in the world. People have this vision that success is just one straight line up to the top right, whereas in reality, I've almost been bankrupt twice. I lived on like $2 a day in New York on ramen noodles, missing payroll 23 times, and so on. And until we came up with this process and with this heuristics that work for us. Now, we're very different types of investors. So today, because we are entrepreneurs during the day and we're building these marketplaces, we only focus on things we understand. We understand marketplaces. So we build and invest in marketplaces, especially. I would describe us as stage agnostic, and we'll do everything from pre-seed to pre-IPO, but of course, there are more seed companies than A companies, more A than B, more B than C, and so on. We're global, 80% US, but we'll invest in all other large markets, and we invest in everything from India to China to Brazil to Germany to the UK. And what sets us apart, frankly, is we're very different from traditional VCs. We don't lead rounds, we don't price rounds, we don't join boards, we don't do any due diligence whatsoever, and we'll decide in 1 to 2 hours whether or not we invest in a startup. So to give you a sense, every week we see about 100 companies, and we invest in 1 to 2 companies a week. So last year we invested in 82 startups. We've made over 50 investments this year, and our average check size is about $400,000. But it ranges from 25K to 10 million. Now, if you wanted to invest in that many companies, you need a process and a heuristic. So our heuristics is really as follows. And this is, in 1 hour, how we're going to decide. So remember, we're only investing in things we know. We know marketplaces. We have a good sense of, like, should it be listing-based or transactional? Should you be taking your commission on the buyer side or the seller side? Do you build liquidity by focusing on suppliers first or on demand? And so basically, when we meet you, in 1 hour, we're evaluating, do we like you, the team? Do we like your business? Do we like the product, and do we like the deal terms? And we're pretty price sensitive. Now, do we like the business? Actually, we subdivide in 9 other heuristics. Can this be a billion-dollar company? Do we like the unit economics? Do we like the capital efficiency? Can it be a leader in the category? And based, frankly, on these basis, or on this basis, focusing on the category we know, we'll decide 1 hour, maybe 2 meetings, so 2 hours, whether or not we invest. And it's worked really, really, really well for us. Now, at the same time, every year we build 2 new companies. So we have this apprentice program where we take the top students, like 2 to 4 year at Harvard, MIT, Columbia, and Stanford, and we take first-year business school students. They work for us full-time during the summer. We train them to be venture capitalists and entrepreneurs. They work part-time during their second year, and when they graduate, if they want, we build a company together. Now, the difference with other startup studios is we're only building marketplaces, and we give 60% of the equity to the founders. We're co-founders, Jose and I. We become executive chairman. We play an active role the first year, and we provide the first $3.25 million of capital, so they don't need to actually worry about what's going on. Now, what I really want to talk to you about today is what are we seeing out there? What are the trends? And maybe give a perspective on being a contrarian on things that have been so hot that, frankly, we actually don't consider to be investable. So in marketplaces, the last few years, people were really focusing on GMV growth, volume growth. But of late, as you may have been noticing, they're actually finally focusing on unit economics. So for us, a company that has good unit economics is a company where your net contribution margin per customer is 3 to 4x over the first 18 months your customer acquisition costs. And the easiest way to get that is either to be in a company where you have a high average order value or where you have high frequency or high recurrency of purchases. And more people now are focusing on unit economics. The second thing is, that's a real trend, is more and more of the companies or the best practices that were in the consumer-facing world are now being brought about to the B2B world. Now, in B2B, if you're in the right business, you can actually have high margin, high average order value, and high recurrency. That said, you need to pick the category well, because you want a sales cycle that's reasonable, and you want to make sure that you're in an industry where there's not too much concentration of your supplier base or of your customer base to avoid margin compression and disintermediation. So one of the companies that we like the best in this industry is Flexport, which is revolutionizing the B2B shipping industry. And the same way that people are saying, Uber is the largest taxi company that doesn't own taxis, or Airbnb is the largest hotel company that doesn't have hotel rooms, we think Flexport is the possibility or the option of being the largest B2B shipping company that doesn't own any ships, doesn't own any trucks, doesn't own any planes. Now, being a little bit of a contrarian, a few things have been really, really hot this year, and a lot of people have been investing in them, funds are being created around them, and I actually want to talk about why I don't think these are really investable, and why, in general, the technologies are not that interesting. What's way more interesting to us as entrepreneurs, as investors, is the application of the technology. So virtual reality is an example. If you take a step back and you look at the success rate and survival rate of startups, in the US, every year, there are 3,000 to 5,000 seed-funded startups that raise over $500,000. Of those, 50% raise a Series A. Sorry, 25% raise a Series A. So 75% do not raise a Series A. Of the 75% that do not raise Series A, the vast majority fail. Of the 25% that raise Series A, about 50% are going to raise a Series B. And about 60% of those that don't raise fail. And the math continues. And so if you actually take this through, the 5-year survival rate of a startup is about 10%. So you have a 90% failure rate, and that's assuming you're going after an established industry, an established market, and you're providing a better service or a better business model. Now, if you're going after a new category, you're adding a new layer of risk. So in the case of virtual reality and augmented reality is this category going to be big? Is this going to be a real business? Now, we probably all believe virtual reality is going to be big, but maybe there's a 50% probability it doesn't become big in the right time frame, and so you're layering on another level of risk. Now take a step back. If you go look at Google Glasses, when they came out, they were super hyped. A lot of people built Google Glasses applications, a lot of people built Google Glass funds, and frankly, because the category didn't take off at that time, though maybe it'll take off in the future, all the companies that did that basically all went out of business. In the case of virtual reality, you're adding another layer of risk beyond the category risk, which is platform risk. Which platform are you building for? Are you building for HTC? Are you building for Oculus? Are you building for PlayStation? And so when you take your 90% startup failure rate, you add on maybe another 50% category failure rate or risk, and another maybe 70, 80% platform risk, you're really taking a huge amount of risk. And the reality is the rewards are not all that big. If you look at when do you want to invest, there's actually a really good case to be made for being a last mover to new platforms. So if you look at the projections for sales in virtual reality, they're expecting like less than 10 million units sold this year. They're expecting an installed base way below 100 million within 4 or 5 years. Now, we believe that you need at least 100 million users in a platform for it to be really interesting. So if you look at iOS, for instance, look at the first, in 2007, the Apple iPhone came out. If you were a game maker then, you made some money, but you weren't that big. It's actually the late movers like Supercell that built multi-billion-dollar companies, because then you had actually a very large user base. You had best practices that were established on monetization and marketing. And so in these types of industries, you want to be the late mover. Something similar in AI. AI has been super hot this year. People have been investing right and left on building AI platforms. Now, the issue with AI is I suspect the platforms are going to be commoditized. It's very possible that Apple, Google, Microsoft, Facebook give away their AI platform. And so what's interesting is actually not the underlying stack, like what AI platform you're building, but actually the applications of AI. So we're building marketplaces, and what's really cool right now is if I want to place something on sale, I take my phone, I take a picture, but then I have to write a title, I have to write a description, I have to select a price, I have to select a category. It's a pain in the neck. Imagine you have image recognition, and all of a sudden all of these things are done for you. Or maybe more interesting, the AI can actually help you be more productive. So there's a company called Reve that actually helps people transcribe. And the people that are transcribers, it's an end-to-end marketplace for transcription, actually use the application all the time because it makes them more efficient. So we're imagining a world where, for instance, and they're not doing this, but UpCounsel is a legal marketplace. You can imagine a scenario where, because the AI allows them to be more productive, you can create win-win-win. You can charge less to the consumer because you can serve more consumers. You can make more as a lawyer because you're serving more, and the marketplace makes more because there's more volume going through it. So same thing in drones. In drones, we want to invest in drone hardware. There are two dominant players right now, DJI and Phantom. But if you go to Shenzhen, you can go to different factories and you say, okay, I want this engine, I want this remote control, I want this propeller. You can actually build a drone company in a few minutes. And so that's highly suggestive that the category will be commoditized and the hardware will not be that interesting. What we're interested in is not the technology. Again, it's the application of the technology. So an example is BetterView. BetterView is this company that does services for insurance companies. So they fly drones over buildings, they identify the ones that need maintenance, and then they work for the insurance companies. So the application of the technology to us is always way more interesting than the technology itself. So this convoluted chart, let's give you a sense of what's going on in technology. And humans are actually reasonably good at making linear projections, but really suck at exponential projections. And in this case, I'm thinking about like, how fast are we going to get self-driving cars, and what are the consequences of it? And the reality is it's coming way sooner than people suspect. So we can actually project the cost of like the LiDARs, of the underlying AI, of the underlying software, and so we can make reasonably good predictions as to when is it cheaper to actually have a self-driving car when you consider the fact that insurance will cost less, et cetera, than to have actually a driven car. So right now, an Uber X in New York is about $1.5 a mile. So as soon as you drive more than 10,000 miles, you're better off buying a car and driving it, even though your car utilization rate is 5%. So most of the time, your car is in a garage. In a world where cars are self-driving, if it's cheap enough, then the number one cost of your car becomes its depreciation. So the car that's being driven 70 or 80 or 90% of the time because it's on a fleet and it's available on an Uber-type platform is actually way, way, way cheaper than a car that you own. So here what's interesting is actually not the first-order impact, but the second-order impact. So the first-order impact of self-driving cars are reasonably obvious. Every year, humans have 50 million car accidents. There are 1.2 million deaths. Okay. That'll go away, and that's actually fantastic. What's more interesting is, and that's what we think of as entrepreneurs and as investors, what are the second-order impacts? If you take a world where the marginal cost per mile is $1.5, and you essentially bring it to quasi-zero, if your last mile to the home delivery costs essentially go to zero, what does that mean? And that's actually a pretty profound implication, because today you would not use Postmates or Deliveroo to order coffee. If your coffee is $1, you don't want to pay a $10 delivery fee. But if a drone or a self-driving vehicle brings you a coffee or a cold drink for essentially free, well then maybe all of a sudden you don't have a fridge at your home because you can order something immediately. Or maybe you don't have a kitchen because it's expensive real estate and you don't know how to cook anyway. And maybe restaurants have larger kitchens, so they focus on delivery. And so the second order implications of these technologies are actually really profound and transformative. And these are the things that we think about in terms of where is technology going and what's investable. Now, the good news is we're seeing progress being made by leaps and bounds across the board. We're still at the very, very beginning of this technology revolution, and there's a massive wave coming. And we're seeing progress in robotics, in 3D printing, in space, and the microsatellite revolution is extraordinary, in solar, and much more. But again, we, as investors and entrepreneurs, technology is interesting, but not that interesting. What are you going to do with the technology? What are the second-order impacts of these much lower costs for putting satellites in space? And so we want to invest in that. And what's interesting is, today as humans, we're extraordinarily privileged to be living in these amazing times. And as entrepreneurs and investors, we are blessed to be helping to bring about this better world of tomorrow, a world of equality of opportunity and of plenty. Thank you.